Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Marissa if you are new here, and today we're going to do a different type of video than I normally do. We're going to be talking about Trisha Paytas and the Mysterious Tea Trisha Paytas series. Specifically, we're going to get into the parts where Mysterious Tea is, in my opinion, picking apart Trisha's SA and also her mental health disorders. So in the first part of this video, I'm kind of going to go over some of the resources, and today we're going to go over SA victims and trauma and the brain and how, you know, victims can have memory loss, they can have discrepancies in their story. Trauma affects the brain in a very big way, and I feel like Mysterious did not really address this side of things, so I kind of just want to give you guys a different perspective. I'm not saying that it's impossible that Trisha's lying about things. Clearly she lied about the teacher being arrested, but that doesn't mean that she lied about the whole thing. Also, in regards to her schizophrenia, I'm not going to say whether or not she has it or doesn't. I'm just going to show what she has said in her interview with Dr. Drew, and how Mysterious Tea left out a whole bunch of context in that video. So let's get started. I'm going to start off by showing you a video really quick about trauma in the brain and how the brain reacts to things like SA. So let's watch that, and then we will discuss everything else. I'm also going to post some resources for people who have suffered from trauma or abuse. If you need any help, Talkspace is the #1 rated online therapy. So this is the national hotline. Survivors or victims can call and chat online 24/7. It will bring you straight to local services, and you can report things and provides counseling and services. And this is the National SA Telephone Hotline, RAIN.
One of the big focuses of my work has been what's happening to someone when they're stressed, when they're afraid, when they're terrified. And that can be when someone is just suddenly realizing that they're being betrayed by a boss they thought cared about them and was nurturing their career, and now suddenly they're treating them as an object. So evolution shaped our brains to have certain responses to danger, to have responses to being attacked, whether it's by a predator that wants to eat us or whether it's by a sexual predator who wants to do things to our body that we don't want done. And one of the ways that we can understand this is that we have a circuitry of our brain. We call it the defense circuitry in neuroscience. And it's a circuitry that's always scanning for danger, and when it detects danger or attack, it shifts how the rest of the brain is working. And one of the things it can do really quickly is shift how people's attention is working. And so their attention becomes grabbed by parts of the experience that seem really crucial to coping and surviving, or not jeopardizing that relationship or the danger to your career and those sorts of things. But it's very, what we call bottom-up attention. It's attention that's captured by things in the experience that are threatening. And one of the other things this defense circuitry does is it can very rapidly impair that reasoning part of our brain, this prefrontal cortex, this part that allows us to be rational and think things through and make good, sophisticated, flexible decisions. And when stress kicks in and when fear kicks in, within a couple of seconds, that part of our brain can become significantly impaired, sometimes basically taken offline. And when that happens, what do we fall back on? We tend to fall back on habits and reflexes and very simple decision-making processes that are not rational things we're thinking out a lot. And we fall back on habits like how to deal with aggressive and dominant people that we've had to deal with in our lives. We may fall back on habits from being abused in the home as a child or prior experiences of sexual abuse. We may fall back on habits of how, especially girls and women, are socialized to deal with unwanted sexual advances that are coming at them so much, and how to politely say no without saying no. And when this defense circuitry takes over, it can make them very vulnerable to being manipulated, to being coerced, to being assaulted. And on the surface, it can look like they might awkwardly smile, they might be engaging in behaviors that on the surface look like it's not such a big deal, but underneath they could be really freaking out. And when things get really extreme, when people are being restrained, when they're being held down and assaulted, when they're really terrified, then they can fall back on really extreme, what I call survival reflexes, where people can actually become paralyzed and unable to move. Sometimes when people are terrified, suddenly their blood pressure and heart rate drop and they become dizzy. They may even pass out from fear. There doesn't need to be alcohol involved for people to pass out in certain assaults. And their body may go limp. And then the perpetrator, they're like a rag doll. The perpetrator just does whatever they want to them. And so these are responses that evolution put into our brains to survive attack by predators. And it may seem strange to talk about that when we're talking about someone preying on someone in harassment or grabbing someone's butt. But these are the effects that we can see. So for example, Taylor Swift, in her deposition in this case that she recently won, some people would say, oh, well, all he did was grab her butt. But she describes how when he grabbed her butt, she went into shock. She couldn't think straight. She could barely get out the words at this meet and greet she was at. She said it was like my personality was erased. And so these effects can be very, very powerful and dramatic of someone just grabbing you in a certain way or doing something to you that is a betrayal, that is treating you like an object. And then finally, in terms of memory, there's these general principles of memory. We're not going to remember everything that happens here. We remember things that we focus attention on. We remember things that are emotionally significant to us. And this gets dramatically amplified when that defense circuitry takes over, when we're under attack. And so certain parts of the experience can get really burned in, and other parts that the person's not noticing or don't seem significant to them at the time, they're not getting encoded into their brain. And this we call differential encoding of what really got attention, what was really scary and awful, versus the things that didn't get much attention and weren't that significant. This can account for people having memories afterwards that seem that are very fragmentary. There's lots of pieces missing. And then another thing that can happen is at a certain stage, the brain can have trouble encoding the sequence of things. So you may be taking in that awful sensation of being grabbed or squeezed or penetrated or the smell of whiskey on the person's breath or something like that. But at a certain point, you may not be taking in what sequence that happens. And so like in the case study, to ask someone to narrate something even forward, let alone in reverse, is going to set them up for inconsistencies in their memory, or questioning someone about things that were peripheral details that they didn't even notice. You're going to create inconsistencies. And as an expert who works on these cases, I see over and over again the inconsistencies in people's memories are caused by the investigators asking the wrong questions, pushing for information that is not available. And so finally, another thing that really affects memory, the way stress can affect memory, is when people are trying to retrieve memories, when they're trying to recall, whether telling their friend or telling an investigator, stress impairs retrieval. And so if you're interviewing with a police officer who isn't believing you, who is doubting you, who doesn't understand these principles of memories, who's asking you to do it in reverse, that's pretty stressful. It's stressful enough to talk to a police officer about these horrible experiences. And then people actually can't remember things that are encoded in their brain. And so these are things that we see in terms of how memory can be affected by stress and trauma that are still terribly misunderstood throughout our culture, even among professionals dealing with this.
As you guys see, it is not at all uncommon for memory loss, for inconsistencies in the story. It is trauma. Your brain does not process it correctly sometimes, and then if you're being asked questions, you can't remember some of it, but that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. And I understand that people want to paint Trisha where she's like this problematic person, so that means she's lying. And that's what I didn't like about Mysterious T's video. Another thing was that she dehumanized her. She dehumanized someone who's had abuse and trauma clearly in their life. She has serious mental health issues right now. She's having a breakdown. What more do people want from Trisha Paytas? I think Trisha Paytas needs to, step off the internet and go get help, recover, get her mind right, and I think people just need to leave her alone at this point. This is serious stuff. It's not drama, it's not tea. And I just wish you guys would remember that she is still a human being. She's still a human being at the end of the day, and we can only pile on somebody so much. when you have the whole internet coming after her, she's crying and having a mental breakdown, and people are saying they're happy she's getting what she deserved. It's just really heartless. It's really gross. And just remember, she's a human being. Mysterious T did a very good job at manipulating and painting a certain narrative about Trisha. And she purposely set out to disprove this essay story. And I think it's gross. Now, is it possible that Trisha's lying? Of course it is. But if she's lying, that doesn't mean that people can still pile on her and trash her, because guess what? If she is lying about this specific story, it could have happened from somebody else. Even Mysterious said herself, oh, I think it happened in her home, not this. Well, she still has trauma, and trauma victims cannot process memories. They can't process their feelings sometimes. Maybe she's placing somebody else in the place of who really did it to her. She still has trauma, she still has abuse, and we still have to take that into account. And I don't think making hours and hours of video trying to trash and discredit her is going to help a victim of trauma and abuse. I just don't. And I understand you guys feel a certain way about Trisha, but please put that aside and remember she's still a person, and she still has serious trauma, serious mental health. She is in a mental health crisis right now. Okay? And Mysterious T did an entire video series on somebody who is clearly mentally unwell. So you saw that video about, you know, assault and the brain and how things process in the brain, and I'm gonna show you a few other things really quick. I'm gonna link a whole bunch of stuff below, and I don't want this video to be an hour, so I'm not gonna be able to read it all out, but please go look through this stuff for yourself. I'm not just making this stuff up. This is all documented articles and research. This is all articles and research done on trauma and SA victims. I am not pulling this stuff out of my ass, okay? Everything that Mysterious T called out about Trisha is very common for SA and trauma and abuse victims. Okay, they can't remember things, their stories are inconsistent. Maybe she said one thing and then a month later she says another thing. Also, it's possible that when she started really getting into therapy, she might have realized some things were different and memories came back to her. That doesn't mean she's completely lying. We don't know. And even if she is lying, like I said, if she was abused in her home, which we have no right to claim where or when she was abused in the first place. But even if she was abused in her home, why are you doing this to somebody like this? Why are you bringing up all this trauma in her life in a damn video series for views and clicks and subscribers? It's not right. It's not right. Here's another one I'm going to read. Why R-word and trauma survivors have fragmented and incomplete memory. Listen to this story. A door opens and a police officer is suddenly staring at the wrong end of a gun. In a split second, his brain is hyper-focused on that gun. It is very likely that he will not recall any of the details that were irrelevant to his immediate survival. Did the shooter have a mustache? What color was the shooter's hair? What was the shooter wearing? The officer's reaction is not a result of poor training. It's his brain reacting to a life-threatening situation just the way it is supposed to. Just the way the brain of a rape victim reacts to an assault. In the aftermath, the officer may be unable to recall many important details. He may be uncertain about many. He may be confused about many. He may recall some details inaccurately. The things his brain focused on with extraordinary accuracy, he may well never forget them. All of this too is the human brain working the way it is designed to work. Last week, Rolling Stone issued a note about their story of a GR at the University of Virginia, a gang R at the University of Virginia after reports surfaced of discrepancies in the victim's accounting. We cannot comment on that particular and clearly complex case without knowing the facts. But in our training of police investigators, prosecutors, judges, university administrators, military commanders, we've found that it's helpful to share what's known about how traumatic experience affects the function of 3 key brain regions. Let's consider the prefrontal cortex. This part of our brain is responsible for executive functions. focusing, attention, rational thought processes, and inhibiting impulses. You are using your prefrontal cortex right now to read this article and absorb what we've written, rather than getting distracted by other thoughts in your head or things going on around you. But in states of high stress, fear, or terror, like combat and sex A, the prefrontal cortex is impaired, sometimes even effectively shut down by a surge of stress chemicals. Most of us have probably had the experience of being suddenly confronted by an emergency, one that demands some kind of clear thinking, and finding that precisely when we need our brain to work at its best, it seems to become bogged down and unresponsive. We're in the midst of experiencing this trauma, your brain can shut down. And imagine trying to pull all those memories out of your head when your brain has pretty much shut down and it's trying to protect you. That's why it is so common to have discrepancies in a victim's story. It wasn't really addressed or made a point where, yes, she has some inconsistencies. Some of the things she's been saying were a little bit inaccurate. She lied about some things. Your memory, you can have memory loss. Like you could not remember specific details that people think you should remember, and you shouldn't be called a liar because of it. Let's talk about post-traumatic stress disorder really quick. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental health condition that's triggered by a terrifying event, either experiencing it or witnessing it. Symptoms may include flashbacks, nightmares, severe anxiety, as well as uncontrollable thoughts about the event. Most people who go through traumatic events may have temporary difficulty adjusting and coping, but with time and good self-care, that's a key part. Good self-care. I don't think Trisha has had very good self-care over the years. They usually get better. If the symptoms get worse, last for months or even years, and interfere with your day-to-day functioning, you may have PTSD. Intrusive memories. Symptoms of intrusive memories may include recurrent, unwanted, distressing memories of the tragic event, reliving the traumatic event as if it were happening again, upsetting dreams or nightmares, severe emotional distress, or physical reactions to something that reminds you of this traumatic event. Trying to avoid thinking or talking about, avoiding places, activities, or people, negative thoughts about yourself, other people, the world, hopelessness, memory problems, including not remembering important aspects of the traumatic event. I'll read that again. Memory problems, including not remembering important aspects of the traumatic event. Difficulty maintaining close relationships, feeling detached from family and friends, lack of interest in activities you once enjoyed, difficulty experiencing positive emotions, and feeling emotionally numb. Now, am I saying she has any of these things? No, I can't diagnose her with anything. Let's see. Changes in physical and emotional reactions. Being easily startled or frightened, always being on guard, self-destructive behavior such as drinking too much, driving too fast, trouble sleeping, she said she's had sleeping problems, trouble concentrating, irritability, angry outbursts, aggressive behavior, overwhelming guilt or shame. So, as you can see, if Trisha Paytas has PTSD, she could, again, experience memory loss and not be able to remember specific aspects of her trauma. For example, Mysterious T is picking apart literally every part of this 7-Up game. Little details like that that are irrelevant. As you can see, irrelevant details are sometimes hard to remember in a state when you're being attacked or you're in some sort of trauma or abuse. So her not remembering how to play the game right or this or that does not mean that she's a liar. That is not a way to discredit a victim, and I'm sorry, but it's very dangerous to put this out there into the world because other victims who have trouble reliving things or remembering certain parts of their story are gonna feel like guilt and shame, and they're gonna be afraid to come forward because of videos like this and because of people on the internet who say, if you don't remember your story exactly, if you make any lies in your story, you're a liar. It never happened to you. And that's just not the case. And I'm clearly showing you. I'm going to link all this stuff below, like I said. And you can clearly see that trauma victims can lie, okay? Now, there's also times where maybe she replaced the teacher with somebody else, which, of course, we don't want an innocent man to get accused. But we also cannot drag and trash and pile on the person who had the trauma by somebody, because she still had trauma. Okay, she could have made up lies to cope with things. She also could have made up that he got arrested because that's the outcome that she wanted. She could have heard that from somebody. She could have been confusing things of somebody else. You never know. And we will never know the exact proof. Nobody proved that she was lying. Nobody did. In fact, Petty Page did a live stream and she doesn't think Trisha Paytas is completely lying, and she's going to drop a video, and she has actually contacted locals from the area. So I cannot wait to see that video. I cannot wait to see what she came up with. Okay. We're going to move on to the mental health aspect of Trisha Paytas in this Mysterious Tea video. Okay. Trisha Paytas has claimed a few times that she has schizophrenia. She did an interview. Okay, I'm going to show you some clips from this interview. She did an interview with Dr. Drew, and Mysterious Tea conveniently only put one tiny clip of that interview in her video, showing that Dr. Drew doesn't think Trisha Paytas has schizophrenia, and she said Trisha Paytas did not fight him or argue about it. She kind of went along with it because maybe she's realized, oh, maybe I don't. You know what I mean? But there were other interesting parts of that interview. So, I'm not saying that she does or doesn't have schizophrenia. I'm not saying she has any mental disorder or anything. I can't diagnose that. I'm just going by what Trisha Paytas has said publicly, what Dr. Drew has said about her in this interview, and I'm kind of just going to show you what else is in that interview, because I feel like a lot was left out of that interview she did, and it was kind of just trying to make her look like a liar. Dr. Drew doesn't think she has schizophrenia, but he does agree with the BPD, the sex addiction, the shopping addiction, and the food addiction. He does agree with that. Now, she goes over, I'm going to show you a clip right now of Trisha Paytas going over her childhood memories and how most of them are blocked, and then we'll come back.
That's two different. You have to actually see, people with borderline disorder often use a lot of substances. Not because they're addicts, because they're borderline.
I have a lot of addictions: sex, food, shopping. And it's serious. It's serious. It's not just like a girl.
No, I know it's serious. And I still think it's just borderline, but because the behaviors are serious enough, you have to approach them like separate problems. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It all goes with borderline. But first of all, I hope people empathize with you on one hand. And secondly, I hope you also help other people, because these are common conditions. So this is a cool conversation.
I'm super open. Yeah, of course. I mean, I just know everyone's like, no matter what I say, they're like pathological. Like, everyone just thinks I lie about everything. So, I mean, I don't know what to say other than like I speak my truth the best I can. And yeah.
Where is that coming from that they insist you're always lying? Again, with borderline, sometimes reality gets a little murky and you probably do kind of lie sometimes. But why do they insist everything's a lie?
I swear I actually have no idea. Even like recently, as of recent, everything I say online, because I am so careful to like not get sued or say the wrong thing. Like I really don't feel I've like lied about anything.
What would explain an untruth? What happens to you that might explain you saying something untrue? Not lying is a specific thing, right? Lying is willfully deceiving. That's different than speaking an untruth. And I'm guessing that you speak something that maybe is a distortion or God knows what.
I do have, as of lately, there's been like hard differentiating reality and delusion. So when someone tells me I did something and like it didn't happen, like that really messes me up, and like that's a real big issue for me.
So
talk. Like, wait, what is
that's
reality?
what I was concerned about. Yeah, I worry about that because that's the liability in this condition. So talk more about that, because I think that's what people are misconstruing as lying, I suspect. But go ahead, because lying is willful deception. Willful deception, speaking untrue or misreporting or not remembering or misremembering, that's a distortion. That's not a lie. So talk about that.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's like, especially with childhood stuff. So recently I started like a podcast just talking about my mental health. And I always say I'm not a mental health expert, just talking about everything from like childhood to the beginning. Right. But the problem is I blocked out a lot of it. So through my own therapy, going back to that, I'm like kind of remembering bits and pieces. Sorry, someone's calling me. Let me decline that. I remember bits and pieces. But there are parts of my life that feels like it wasn't even me living it. So I'm kind of, sometimes I question if that was real. And I also, so it's like, it's almost like I like relive my life like a movie, and like I remember things happening, but then I'm like, okay, but did it happen? Like it's very fuzzy, and it's like, and that's, you know, you tell yourself stuff so much throughout life, and I'm just, so that is true. So when I talk about my own experiences, I do think people are like, well, that date doesn't go out with that date. And I was like, maybe, you know, and that's why I've just always been really hesitant to talk about things like that, because I am just so foggy on a lot of it, and I don't know what I know stuff happened. But
yeah, people have to understand that this is something you and I have not talked about. And again, I hope somebody out there begins to understand how our brains work. One thing you're talking about is memory function, which is affected by trauma and affected by a million things. You're also talking about drugs and alcohol affecting your perceptions. You're talking about sort of delusional things that your borderline process brings in. You're talking about trying to put things together when you engage in highly traumatizing behaviors, right? I mean, it would be characteristic and expected for, like, if you were sitting to me in treatment and you started reporting things from that period, I would just listen. I would carefully, you know, frame it for you, but I would have no idea whether it actually happened or not. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of stuff that you're experiencing and you have to process.
About anything.
As you can see, she remembers bits and pieces. Some of it is fuzzy. And this actually is a very important thing because of the mix-up details and discrepancies in her essay story. And Mysterious T left all of this stuff out and didn't even... This was not an unbiased video. She did not show the other side where maybe Trisha Paytas has some other trauma or things, or just another point of view to what's going on in the Trisha Paytas story. She left all this stuff out that gives a lot of context about Trisha Paytas. Past trauma that affects her memory. So as you guys can see, her memory might be messed up, that she suffered trauma, that she has mental health disorders. Dr. Drew thinks she has BPD, not schizophrenia. Now, I don't know where she got that from, if it was from her doctor. I don't know if she just made it up. But again, her trauma and abuse can cause her to lie. Maybe she lied because she didn't want to say what she really had. We don't really know. Okay, now is it good to lie about what you have if she's lying about it? Of course not. But clearly, all the lies that she tells just point to a person that is in a severe mental health crisis, and that's what we have to remember. She couldn't remember parts of her childhood and teen years. She could remember her time as an escort and drug and alcohol time of her life, though. Now, she also talks in this interview about her SA abuse in detail, and remembering the first time was when she was 6 at summer camp.
You're prostituting, or I mean, that seems like it was a very out of control time.
Yeah, it's funny because it was out of control, but like that part I remember more so than like my childhood. I really like childhood feels like none of, I don't even feel like as a child ever, or a teenager, like that to me is all very much a blur. So it's all, there's a lot of stuff there. With escorting, I remember it a lot more vividly. It's just one of those things where I romanticized it even back then. Like I always thought it was like really fun and like cool, and like I thought I was like in control of it. So with that stuff, I remember pretty clear. I remember things pretty clear with that, even despite being on drugs and stuff like that. So it's just more of like timelines I'm really foggy with, because my early 20s, like teenager, 16 to 20s, I was doing all that and I don't know what I was doing. I don't know where I was, you know?
And what, can you talk about what happened in childhood that was so murky?
You know, there was a lot of like, there was a lot of stuff with like older guys that like I thought was like normal, and I still try and process it, like, you know, with like the touching of my boobs or talking about my boobs, you know, like hugging from behind and like stuff like this, like, you know, I and even like fingering, like that kind of stuff, not to get too graphic, but like, you know, stuff that I didn't know was sex, like, you know, I'm just like, oh, but that like happened, but like, you know, but was it okay?
How
you know,
old
obviously
were you?
now
How
I know
old were you
not.
How old were you and how old were the guys?
The first memory I have was a summer camp when I was like 6 years old. And I remember like,
6
he's
years
like,
old.
I'm going to like, yeah. And that was like, this is something that
Oof.
like, yeah, it's a lot. Cause I remember it like again, I remember it, but then it's like I don't remember like leading up to it because this was like a summer camp, and I just remember like all the details, but I don't remember going to my therapist. Like, is it penetration? Is it just outside stuff? Like, it's all so foggy to me. Like, that part doesn't feel, and I don't know. It's just there's a lot that I've never talked about even to like my therapist, and it's like I'm finally talking about it, but it's so hard because I don't remember so much of it, and I don't know.
So clearly, she has suffered years and years worth of trauma from different people. Okay? Now, Mysterious T also wanted to say that, how likely is it that 3 men could assault her? How can you say something like that? What about the women out there it's very common for them to be SA'd by multiple people at multiple different times in your life. I'm going to show you and link an article right here about sexual victimization, where people who have been through trauma and abuse in their life are more prone to happening it to them again. There have been people out there who have had multiple men abuse them at the same time, more than three or more, 4, 5, 6. It is not uncommon. So she is making very dangerous statements that is just very upsetting and offensive, which is why I don't think things like this should be covered on T channels. Because you never know who you're going to hurt and offend, what kind of victim you're going to upset with your words. You have to be very careful. Towards the 24-minute mark to after 30-minute mark, Dr. Drew points out that he thinks she has BPD.
Especially mental illness. So many people come to me like, oh, you don't have this, it's not this. And like with voices, when I was talking about voices in my head on frenemies, it was shut down with, those are just, what's the word? Intrusive thoughts. And I'm like, no, these aren't, there's people standing in front of me. That's, there's animals, there's a dog next to me, like it's happening. And so I don't like when people just have like stuff to say, it's just a lot.
So I'm guessing, does the antipsychotic help with the auditory hallucinations?
Yeah, tremendously. Those recently, those were recent for me. And that's the other thing, people are like, oh, you developed this at 33. I was like, yeah, kind of. Like, I don't know where these came from. And they're very vivid, and they're more than intrusive thoughts. They're just conversations. They're bells. I hear I'll hear a door, but like it's a lot. It's just a lot right now. But yeah, it's helped. I've been on it since May.
And that can certainly happen. And that can happen with I understand you had a schizophrenia diagnosis at one time. That is not what you have. But I could see how if you were having these kinds of symptoms, somebody might think that.
Well, they put me on medication for schizophrenia. I don't know like if I have it, but that's what I'm on right now. And it's like this new, it's like, I don't know if it's
no.
It's like a
you're having borderline. You should know this about borderline syndrome. But the name borderline was originally invented by psychoanalysts. It was like during the 50s or maybe before that. To what was borderline was they were considering these patients borderline psychotic. And so they were people that were having psychotic symptoms, but were not schizophrenic. You understand? And so the psychotic symptoms can be helped with the antipsychotics. It's just part of the borderline process.
That's so interesting because I went, because my therapist can't give me medication. So I went to a psychiatrist, and it was just 2 or 3 meetings, and they were like, oh, you should be on this medication. And so it's helped with it. But so it's psychosis is part of borderline, because I thought it was 2 different like disorders. I thought there was like a psychotic disorder and a mental disorder.
No, it was originally called borderline psychotic. That was the original term. And because there can be prominent psychotic symptoms, but they don't progress, they don't go anywhere. They're just, part of what, they can come and go, much like you're experiencing it. I'm wondering if maybe all your drug use didn't suppress that.
And that could be because I think I've done drugs my entire life of some sort. So when I became completely sober, which was January, which I was really happy, I just bought a new house, I loved it. That's when it started happening. And I was like, it was really scary.
There's also a lot of overlap between borderline and bipolar. And I'm guessing you have a lot of bipolar type symptoms, or maybe people have wondered, is Trisha bipolar, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but I was diagnosed with, or I was at least given medication for it. I don't know if it was a diagnosis, but I was given lithium, and that's when I was like wanting to kill myself. Like that was awful. I don't know what that was. That was really awful for me.
Wrong diagnosis, right? You get the right diagnosis and the right treatment. You notice how DBT worked, right? The right treatment for the right diagnosis makes you better. How do you feel like you're doing now?
I do think I'm doing really well. Like, again, that's why I can't read the internet, because everyone's like, like even this week I did a podcast and I just defended myself, and everyone's like, she's spiraling. And it's just like the internet being psychologists telling people gaslighting, manipulation, spiraling. Also, it's like, I'm not spiraling. I'm actually doing fine. I mean, I did have to like remove myself from watching content.
He has credentials, he knows what he's talking about, so of course if Dr. Drew is telling her these things, she's gonna listen and be like, oh, okay, maybe you are right. And that doesn't mean that she's not arguing or fighting for her schizophrenia. She's listening to what Dr. Drew is saying. So all in all, guys, I just wanted to show you a different side of things and give a bunch of resources so you guys can go through this stuff and do your own research, and show you that she has had trauma. She's in a severe mental health crisis. She might have BPD or schizophrenia. We don't really know. We can't diagnose that, but I don't think we should be talking about it. And you don't say, oh, well, Trisha talks about it. Okay, I get that. But that doesn't mean you can make a hours of long series trying to prove how she's lying about her mental health. You don't know. We don't know for sure. Just because she lied about things in her past doesn't mean she's lying about all this stuff. That is not enough evidence, and that's not enough for Mysterious to push it as fact. Because guess what? Trauma victims can have memory loss. They can make up things. They can have discrepancies. It's not uncommon at all. And at the end of the day, no matter what mental health or disorder or what trauma or abuse Trisha Paytas has had, she has had those things, and we need to remember that, and we need to not pile on her. We need to make sure she's getting the help that she needs, because all of this problematic behavior is caused by these issues. Now, am I saying mental health can be an excuse? No, but there are certain people who are severely having a lot of a mental health crisis. They've had a severe trauma and abuse, and it's not just your everyday person making a drama video on it, and we really have to remember that. So please, let's be a little bit more respectful about somebody's trauma and abuse. Let's be respectful about somebody's mental health, because we don't want anything to happen to Trisha Paytas. I believe her emotional breakdown. I believe it, and I believe that she has something severely going on with her right now, and she needs help and support from her husband. She needs to be with her doctors. She needs to take some time off the internet, and I think everybody should stop talking about her. Also, as far as the teacher, you guys can support the teacher without completely trashing and throwing Trisha Paytas under the bus. Okay, guys, I also want to show you a story. A false report highlights how women who report sexual assault are treated. Believe all women. That's been the rallying cry of the #MeToo movement. It's been embraced by some, but viewed by others as just too naive. This tension over the credibility of women is nothing new, especially in our investigations. Ken Armstrong and T. Christian Miller explore this tension in their new book, A False Report. A true story of R in America. The story begins with Marie, a young woman in Washington who told police there she was R'd at knife point in her apartment in 2008. A week later, police confronted Marie with inconsistencies in her story, and they pressured her to recant, just like people are pressuring Trisha Paytas to admit that she lied. Just like by doing that to Trisha Paytas, you're telling all other victims, if they have inconsistencies in their story, that they should admit they're lying. She did. The terrible thing was Marie had not lied, and her attacker went on to R several more women. So clearly, you guys, this can happen. You can't pressure somebody into saying that they're lying, because guess what? What if they aren't lying? What if they're telling the truth? They just mixed up some of the pieces. What if they just lied about some of the details? But what if they aren't lying? And how dangerous is it to assume she's lying and make that known to all other victims out on the internet? It's a very dangerous game to play. So please remember this.
RAIN has been supporting survivors of sexual violence since 1994.
We have teams dedicated to education, prevention, and response.
Improving the criminal justice system.
And changing the way America thinks about sexual violence.
Our hotline is 100% confidential. It's anonymous, it's safe, and free.
Whether you're looking for information or just want someone to listen, we'll be there.
Through the media, entertainment industry, and colleges across the country, we're making sure the public understands the reality of sexual violence and asking everyone to join us in the fight to end it.
We work with companies, schools, government agencies, and other organizations to develop policies and provide training to create a culture of safety.
We're leading the national effort to remove barriers so that survivors receive the justice they deserve.
And are helping to pass laws to end sexual assault and make our communities safer.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
Porque siempre voy a atender a tu llamada.
Because I'm here to support you with what you need to heal.
Because I will work to prevent violence and to create a safer future.
Because I share your story.
Because we.
Because we will fight for you.
Because we stand with you.
Because with RAIN, you are not alone.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you got a different perspective on the situation. I really appreciate you listening to what I have to say. Please subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.